privilege to welcome and introduce our next resource person, Dr. Joshi Jacob Varipalli, CMI, to our respected audience. Dr. Joshi Jacob Varipalli is basically a priest from CMI and also a psychotherapist by profession. Dr. Joshi Varipalli, thanks for accepting our invitation. He holds a double master's, one in English literature from Osmania University, Hyderabad, and another in social work from Nagpur University. Later, he pursued his doctoral studies from University of Santo Tomas, Manila, Philippines. Dr. Joshi conducted his first experimental study, emotion-focused couples communication program with the distorted couples in 2016. He was successful in defending his doctoral thesis in clinical psychology in 2016, and his book is available in Amazon on the same topic. Those who are interested means they can purchase from Amazon. He published psychological studies, Journal of Contemporary Psychotherapy, etc. Overall, he is an expert in psychotherapy field. He also developed an innovative approach towards enhancing couples communication and improving marital satisfaction. He is also the founder director of Samvad, a center for dialogue, counseling, and psychotherapy. Overall, his area of interest includes the field of marriage, family, couples, communication, and effective parenting. Here in this platform, he will be connecting us to the techniques of psychotherapeutic techniques that is relevant at this current time. So dealing with stress and suicides. So a warm welcome to you, sir. We all are waiting for you, Dr. Joshi, for your psychotherapeutic techniques to identify symptoms and recover from it. Kindly take over the platform for your presentation, sir.
A very good afternoon to all. And thank you, Tinu Joseph, for those words of It is indeed a great pleasure to join you all on this platform this afternoon and discuss one of the major factors that is affecting the human life, especially during this pandemic, COVID-19. I would begin with this famous quotation from the soliloquy, that is from the Shakespearean drama called Hamlet, or not to be. To be or not to be, the famous opening phrase of the soliloquy uttered by Hamlet in the drama. The soliloquy is essentially all about life and death, a constant that is constantly troubling the human mind, whether to live or to die. In the soliloquy, of course, Prince Hamlet discusses how painful and miserable it is to live as a human being, and how oftentimes death is supposed to be preferable over living. Now, when the human mind comes out of this confusion of to be or not to be and sides more and more towards that second option, which is not to be, or rather to end the life, then the suicide occurs. Suicide occurs. Let me just give a small gist of what is suicide all about and some of the key factors that can be easily understood by all. Of course, Bishop Ji had given an elaborate definition and the different aspects dealing with suicide, but here we have a small little explanation about suicide. Suicide is nothing but a deliberate and voluntary act of causing one's own death. And oftentimes it is said that it is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Yes, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. The problem may be a temporary, but then someone who is committing suicide is putting a permanent solution or end to that problem. So that is suicide all about. We have a few key factors here on the screen. Over 8 lakh people die by suicide annually, representing one person every 40 seconds. That is too alarming. In the worldwide, at every 40 seconds, one person commits suicide. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among the age group of 15 to 29. A very alarming situation where we, the education institutions and the people who are in the care of the youth have to be very, very careful and attentive to. For each victim, it is estimated that at least 20 people from among the family members and friends will experience an emotional, social, and economic impact. The global suicide rate is 11.4 per a lakh people, a population of 1 lakh people. And among them, for males it is 15, and for females it is 8. 8 out of 1 lakh people. Now, depression and other mood-related disorders account for a major number of suicidal attempts and incidents. A study in Penang, in Malaysia, found that close to 20% of the students experience depression, and with 66% of them attempting suicide. Self-harm largely occurs among older adolescents and globally is the second leading cause of death for older adolescent girls. In the year 2012, 76% of global suicide occurred in low and middle income countries, and 39 of which occurred in the Southeast Asia region, again bringing the situation in India quite alarming. There has been a sharp increase in self-harm incidents and tendencies since the pandemic COVID-19 hit the Indian society. This is a report reported by Times of India, quoting a study done by Suicide Prevention India Foundation, which is Bangalore based. Again, there are studies which show that 66 children committed suicide in Kerala during this lockdown period. According to police reports, 5 suicide deaths occur every day in Jharkhand. Quite alarmingly serious situation. In Ludhiana, Punjab, suicide deaths have jumped by 11% during the COVID-19 menace. But the very disheartening situation is this. In spite of this alarmingly overwhelming phenomenon, only 38 countries worldwide have come up with a national suicide prevention strategy till date. And unfortunately, India has not developed one yet. September 10, the date September 10 every year is observed as the World Suicide Prevention Day. Suicide is the result of a convergence of risk factors, as many of our speakers already have mentioned, including but not limited to genetic, psychological, social, and cultural risk factors, sometimes combined with experience of trauma and loss. Yeah, so these are the causal factors which lead a person to commit suicide. Depression is the most common psychiatric disorder in people who die by suicide. 50% of individuals in high-income countries who die by suicide have major depressive disorder at their time of death. So these are the studies coming up with the results which lead us to reflect as to how we have to manage the situations, the attempts and the tendencies of suicide among the people who are dear and near to us. Relatives and close friends of people who die by suicide are a high-risk group for suicide due to the psychological trauma of a suicide loss. Yeah, if someone in the family already has committed suicide, that psychological trauma also affects and sometimes impels the other member of the family also to follow the suit. It could be sometimes the potential shared familial and environmental risk. Suicide contagion through the process of social modeling, as Bishop Ji was saying. Sometimes we follow, especially the youngsters follow the role models like film stars and the great sports persons. And if something happens, unwanted happens among those communities, this is spilled over. It becomes contagious and crosses over to the vast majority of the youth in our country and elsewhere. And again, another factor is the burden of stigma associated with this loss. I know a person for certain that his father committed suicide, and that stigma, that social stigma, that burden, that shame was so much on this man that after a few years, he also ended his life. So these are some of the factors which we have to be really careful about. But Despite of the fact there are so many negative factors and alarmingly disturbing facts and figures, everything is not lost. That is the best thing about preventing or protecting protective factors about suicide. As Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the General Secretary of World Health Organization says, every death is a tragedy to the family, to the friends, and to the colleagues. Yet, he boldly says, yet suicides are preventable. Suicides are preventable. It is from here that we make our journey. Let us now see some of the protective and preventive factors in the cases of suicide. And now I would say the most effective protective factor against suicide is connectedness. Connectedness with the family, with the friends and colleagues, and with a charming environment. And finally, of course, I have not put that here on the screen, but finally, connectedness with the Creator. From a spiritual point of view, connectedness with the Creator. The importance of connectedness. We are all part of a community, are born into a family. We all belong to a family, to a circle of friends. We also are related with our colleagues, our neighbors, and different teams of which we are a member. And therefore, we all are part of a bigger community, a bigger reality, entity. But sometimes there is a chance that we become isolated and disconnected from our communities. And it is there that the red flags have to be seen. The moment that someone is apparently isolated or disconnects himself or herself from the community, red flags indicating the dangers of falling in the line of committing suicide or ruminating thoughts troubling that person have to be identified. And then we have the responsibility to support and to empower those who become vulnerable in our communities. Therefore, the importance of connectedness. Reaching out to those in the community, this is another factor. Also, a continuation of this main point called connectedness. If we are worried that someone is in our community, someone is in trouble, we have to reach out and ask them, are you okay? Constant connection and relationship with someone would always keep that person safe from committing suicide. By simply checking in with them and offering non-judgmental support, we can make a difference. Yes. Connecting oneself with others by simply checking in and just to see how they are, what they are doing, how is their day. Simple gestures like this, a friendly questions like, how are you doing today? What are you up to today? What do you have been to, or where you have been to? This kind of friendly inquiries would make a real difference. Empowering our community. Again, this is another fact. If the community is of a greater protective factor, then we need to empower our community. Encourage those in distress to tell their own stories. Yes, as many of our speakers have mentioned here, encourage them. Later on, I will come up with 10 points where this point is coming very clearly. Encourage the people to narrate their stories, tell their stories, share their pains to the other members of the community, but not in a way that we want them to, but allowing them to do this in their own way, at their own pace. Sometimes they may not be willing to say the whole thing immediately, but bit by bit. But then we have to be really patient, allowing them to share their stories, their pains, their anxiety, their fears in their own way, at their own pace. By engaging in active listening, as Father Paul Shetty clearly mentioned, active listening and reaching out to those who are vulnerable in the community, together we can build resilient and strong communities. Now, when we speak about connectedness and help reaching out to others, we have to always bear in mind this one thing: no one has all of the answers. No one has the ultimate answer for all the questions, all the problems. Father Joseph was just mentioning, yeah, we need to have that humility or the readiness to even make referrals, contact other health providers or help giving people, to refer the cases, to contact and to consult and collaborate with others. People are often reluctant. But in spite of all our efforts, still sometimes we may find ourselves wanting. Therefore, this problem also can come as an impediment for us from helping others. People are often reluctant to intervene when they are worried for others, because we think that we are not good enough, we are not competent enough. So because of that fear, because of that doubt about our own capabilities, sometimes we keep ourselves away from helping others. They may not feel knowledgeable enough or competent enough, may not feel like the right person to do this kind of a job. So these kind of things can keep us away from helping someone who is in need. But then it is very important to know that people in distress are often not looking for specific advice, not specific and permanent solutions, but oftentimes the people who are in trouble, the people who are distressed because of their different aspects of life, maybe like a loss of someone who is very dear to them, a loss of job, a breakup in a relationship, a failure in the business, or whatever might be the causes. But then the people in distress oftentimes do not look for a specific advice or a permanent solutions, but they are merely looking to be heard patiently, to be heard with love, to be assured that someone is there whom they can approach. So it is important for us to know that people in distress are not often looking for specific advice, but merely to be listened to with compassion and empathy. We also, as I mentioned a while ago, we also have to reach out to the people who have experience in helping others. People with lived experience of suicidal behavior, also the survivors of the victims. If the father dies of a family, the survivors of that victim, the other family members, they may have to say a lot of things which could come handy and helpful in helping others who may be entertaining the thoughts of suicide. So people with lived experience of suicidal behavior or suicide bereavement have a lot to teach us. The listening to those often inspiring individuals who we are learning, and they may become empowered to seek help. So this is again a kind of a give and take, a collaborative approach where we are ready to learn from others, from their experiences. And then with all those insights and inspirations, we can become a better helper in the case of someone who is attempting suicide. Now, preventive measures, which I have divided into, or rather, these are the three different stages of preventive measures, like universal, selective, indicated. Let us see what are they in detail. Universal prevention strategies. They are designed to reach an entire population. For example, the entire population of a school, all the children, all the students of the school, in an effort to maximize health and minimize suicide risk by removing barriers and to care and increase access to help, strengthening protective processes such as social support and altering the physical environment. Yes, so it directly hits the entire community, the entire society. It's very universal. Whereas the second one, the selective prevention strategies, which are selective, target vulnerable groups within characteristics such as age, sex, occupational status, or family history. If you remember the few key facts that I have mentioned, the most vulnerable group in the age-wise is from 15 to 29. So we have to give a special attention to this age group people. And then in comparison to women, there are more number of men attempting suicide. So again, a kind of selective attention to particular target group. While individuals may not currently express suicidal behaviors, they may be at an elevated level of risk of biological, psychological, or socioeconomic factors because they belong to a particular population group. Therefore, a selective prevention strategy. And the third one, of course, is a direct prevention method or a direct help given to a particular person or individual or group, which target specific vulnerable individuals within the population, those displaying early signs of suicide potential or who have made a suicide attempt already. So a direct help given to a person who already has identified as someone who is ruminating, someone who is thinking, someone who is already planning about suicide, or someone who has already made an attempt to commit suicide. So these are the three different levels of strategies that we engage in preventing suicidal cases. Now, towards the end of my presentation, I come up with 10 different steps in suicide prevention. 10 different steps. Of course, we have already seen these factors, these points in different ways and different occasions, but I am putting it in a list so that we can easily remember them and then come up with our own contributions in helping the people who are troubled with this suicidal ideation, suicidal contemplation of thought, and suicidal attempts, and as Bishop mentioned, suicidal completion. So the first step again is listening, patient listening. We have to be very open and patient to listen for the meaning behind the words of the people who are around us. Sometimes, as Sister Seema mentioned about the symptoms and signs, people may repeatedly pronounce some words, some sentences, some peculiar type of talking, especially when they are contemplating this thought of committing suicide. So we have to be very, very, very attentive, and then we have to really try to see or divine the meaning of those words which are implicated. We have to support their being open about suicide. We have to encourage them to talk. Unfortunately, we have that myth that talking about suicide would increase the possibility of suicide. No, we have to encourage the people. There is another point which is to come. We have to encourage the people to talk. So we have to support them being open. We have to encourage them to be open, but at the same time, we should not be judgmental. If we become judgmental, if we try to argue with them that their perception is wrong, they are taking a step which is sinful, which is unwanted for. If we are trying to judge them, if we are trying to argue with them, they lose the trust and confidentiality in us, and then they stop sharing. Therefore, don't be judgmental. Don't minimize. Sometimes we, out of our enthusiasm, we sometimes say to the people, oh no, that is nothing, don't worry about that. But then sometimes people feel repelled, from us when we say we don't understand, or we don't agree with the kind of pain that they are talking about. If we try to minimize their pain by our words, they may again feel that this person doesn't understand me and there is no point in sharing with him or her. So don't try to minimize their pain. Accept as they are. Agree with them when they say that they are having intense pain, intense trouble, distress in their mind. Accept them as they are. Oftentimes, the people who are speaking about suicidal tendencies or thoughts, they are not lying. They are not lying. They are not trying to manipulate situations. They are speaking the truth. So do not try to minimize their pain or water down the intensity or the gravity of the situation. Accept them as they are. Take their word as they really mean. Offer empathy rather than try to fix the problem. As I mentioned a while ago, it's not possible for all of us to always fix the problems of others. But if we can offer a warmth where the other person would really feel that this person is there with me, if we can be empathetic with them, that is a great way in helping people who are troubled with these suicidal tendencies. The next step again is instilling hope in the people. As Sister Seema mentioned, one of the major reasons why people think of contemplating or committing suicide is that they lose hope in their life. They feel utter hopelessness. There is nothing for me now. Everything is lost. There is no one as wretched as I am. So these are some of the ruminating thoughts that come into the minds of the people who contemplate about suicide. But then, as a person who is helping them, we have to instill hope in them. Try to tell them that though very grievous and serious is your situation now, there would come a time that this also would pass. Nothing is permanent, and therefore you will come out of this. So try to instill hope in them. Also mention that there are so many people out there who are already feeling the same way that you are feeling, but then they are patiently trying, and then they are able to manage these feelings of hopelessness, and they survive. And therefore you too can survive. You too have a future. So instill hope in them. It is the second step. And the third step, make contracts. This is something very practical that we all can do. If we doubt that someone is in the danger of committing suicide, or someone is already contemplating about suicide, this is a kind of contract that we can make with them. Make them feel obligatory to follow, to keep a word. Oftentimes I do this when in my clinic, when I get some clients who have this suicidal ideations or tendencies. I make it a point that they give me a call every day, or I will ask them, when are you coming next? Can we meet on next week? And then if they give me the word that yes, we can meet on next week, they will feel obligated to at least keep themselves alive till next week. So this is how we can prolong the chances of people committing suicide. So make contracts with them. Encourage the persons to enter into a contract with you, making some promises for them to keep till you meet the person the next time. It could be after 1 hour, it could be after 1 week, it could be after 1 month. So what is feasible, what is achievable, decide upon that, make an agreement, make a contract with the person, and then he or she may feel obligated to keep the word, and that will keep him or her alive for that much period of time. So this is a practical way by which we can somehow prolong the possibility, we can avert the situations. The fourth step, of course, which we have mentioned many times, is encourage the people to talk, encourage them to share their stories, encourage them to seek help. This is one area where very often people feel so blank. The people who are gripped with this thought of hopelessness, that nothing is there for me now, they don't even care to seek help from someone. But then, as we mentioned in the second step, we are instilling hope. We have to encourage the people who are troubled with this suicidal tendencies and thoughts to talk about their pains and their mental situations. We can also directly sometimes ask, if we see some of the signs and symptoms in a particular person, we can directly ask them, what is your thought about your life? Or sometimes even direct questions can provoke the person. Are you contemplating about ending your life? In some certain extreme situations, we can also provoke the person with a direct question. We need to encourage the people to talk. They need to talk, they need to share, and they also need to be seeking help from others to avert this menace. Now going further to restricting access to means, as many, even Bishop was very elaborately speaking about this. Yes, this is another important practical step that we need to take. People hang themselves, people cut their veins, people consume poisons, people jump from buildings, people jump into a pool of water and drown themselves, people jump in front of the trains. So there are so many means by which people attempt suicide. So we, as a conscious responsible citizen of the community, someone who is really concerned about the well-being and prosperity of the people around us, we need to take all the measures in restricting the access of the people who are contemplating suicide to the lethal means by which they may perhaps try to end their life. We have to be very, very careful in the room that they are living in, the kind of situations that they are moving around. We have to be very careful that they will not get any access to lethal weapons or means through which they may attempt to end their life. And also, accompaniment is another very important aspect here. If someone is there always, not always watching them or scrutinizing their movements, but rather in a very silent, passive way, if we feel that someone is in danger of contemplating or committing suicide, contemplating about suicide or committing suicide, then we have to be accompanying them from a distance, but then make sure that they are not left alone, they are not left to have access to lethal weapons or means of suicide. Next step is again developing and training gatekeepers. Gatekeepers, that is a beautiful term that is used to the people who are ready to help other people. Developing and training gatekeepers. Who is a gatekeeper? We should know, first of all, who is a gatekeeper. A gatekeeper is anyone who believes that suicide can be prevented. If you yourself are contemplating about suicide, then you cannot be a gatekeeper. A gatekeeper should be someone with so much of positivity, someone who believes that yes, suicide can be prevented with right, proper, timely intervention and accompaniment. Suicidal situations, incidents and attempts can be prevented and averted. So that is a gatekeeper. Again, another characteristic of a gatekeeper is that he or she should be willing to spend time for others. He or she should be willing to spend time and energy. If someone who is so preoccupied with his or her own programs and intentions, he or she may not be justifiable in becoming a gatekeeper, because he or she may not be able to give ample time, give a patient listening, give an attention to the sorrows and pains of someone who is already distressed with these and then contemplating suicide. So a gatekeeper simply is someone who believes positively that prevention of suicide is possible, suicide is preventable, and then someone who is willing to give his or her time and energy for the people who are distressed with this situation. So we have a number of them, like teachers, of course, as education community. This is the prime focus and the prime responsibility of every teacher to play the role of a gatekeeper in the lives of the students who step into our campus. Teachers, health professionals, and counselors and psychologists, social workers who work for the upliftment of the society as a whole, police personnel, and the religious leaders, of course. Religious leaders who have a major influence on the society, especially in our Indian scenario, which is very much spiritual. Spiritual leaders have got a higher influence on the society. So all these people can really work as a gatekeeper. And then I was somehow related to a particular school in Chandrapur district where we had introduced this peer help groups. No one can understand the situation of a friend than someone who is of that same age group perhaps, especially in the case of adolescent boys and girls, especially the students in the high school situations. There are so many people who can easily give us an indication as to someone is in a trouble, especially the classmates, the peer groups. They can easily sense the pulse of someone who is contemplating these kind of thoughts. So we made a cell. We developed a kind of a peer group helpers, peer help groups in that particular school, and then they have periodical meetings, very informal. It is not a kind of intimidating. Of course, if someone is looked up to as someone who is always trying to commit suicide, and then we are always on guard to protect him, that person would feel intimidated, and therefore it should not be a formal way, but then very informal way. It's not targeting a particular person, but then taking care of everyone, one another. If there are groups, these group members have to be really concerned about the well-being of everyone, every other one in the group. So that is called peer help groups, which we can easily implement in all of our schools. Again, we also, coming to the next topic, next step is make safety plans. Yes, we need to have safety plans. We need to execute some safety plans also with the person who is contemplating suicide, also, and so also with the communities, the societies of which we are a part. Especially with regard to schools, again, we can have this crisis management cells in schools, and I think in the CBSE pattern and it is very mandatory for the schools to have crisis management cells these days. And of course, we also have to have these kind of cells and the groups in the communities, in the parishes where we are working, or in the workplaces where we are employed. We need to have a crisis management cells. And we also need to plan, make a crisis planner for the person himself or herself. When they come to your counseling center or come to your counseling room, when they approach you as a teacher, ask the person, what as Father Paul Shetty very beautifully mentioned, ask them what are their strengths. Ask them what are their strengths and how can they cope up in a better manner. What are their fears? What are their strengths? So we should help the person in concern to have a safety plans. And also the last point there is hotlines and helplines. There are so many associations. Of course, though India as a nation doesn't have a national strategy for suicide prevention, there are so many voluntary organizations and individuals and counseling centers around the country that can really be of help to the people who are in need. So make some numbers available to the people so that they can immediately make a call, approach someone and get help. There are so many institutions and organizations which really do 24/7 service in helplining, in helping the people who are in trouble. So we have to make sure that these hotlines, these contact numbers, these websites or organizations where we can easily get an access to are available, and it is decimated, communicated, it is made known to the people who are in trouble. And as we were mentioning about making a contract, we also make sure that this person, before he does anything drastic, makes a call or contacts someone. So that is another way of helping people who are in trouble. The next step number 8, is something like media strategy. This Bishop Ji was very beautifully mentioning about the influence of the media on the minds of the people, especially the young generation. So, so much so that the nation as a whole and also as communities as we are, we need to have some policies, we need to have some restrictions, we need to have some screening about how things appear on the media, because a negative impact is very great of the media on the minds of the people. If the news about captions and news about incidents and tendencies of suicide is so much broadcasted and brought into the site, exposed, and the youngsters are getting exposed to such things, they may feel an inner compulsion sometimes to try those methods. Sometimes someone who is attempting suicide but does not know which means to take to, maybe getting some kind of an inspiration encouragement when they watch such incidents on the TV or on the social media. And therefore, we need to have a very clear-cut restrictive media strategies. And of course, the last but one point, step number 9 is pharmacotherapeutic and the psychotherapeutic approaches. Pharmacotherapeutic, which is psychiatric, helping the people with medicine. Medication is very much necessary in some cases. And then in many practices, it has been found that antidepressant medicines like lithium and clozapine are very much effective because they are mood stabilizers. As we have seen, suicide takes place when the people have a very low ebb in their moods, when they are so depressed, they feel so depressive, when they feel that nothing is there for them in the future to live on to, when they feel so helpless and hopeless, they attempt suicide. So these antidepressant medicines sometimes can, encourage them or improve their moods, their positivity, and then that way these situations can be averted. Coming to psychological or psychotherapeutic approaches, there are two very effective therapies which we often use in our clinics, in our counseling centers and practices, which is known as CBT, cognitive behavioral therapies, which directly targets or hits the erroneous thought pattern of the person. As we saw in the second step, which is instilling hope, very often people think that there is no hope for them. Now, going further is an impossibility, which is oftentimes an erroneous thought, a negative thought. Therefore, CBT attempts to correct or challenge, to change those erroneous thoughts into positive thoughts. Yes, though I am in severe situation, though I am in great pain, there are so many other people who are also going through this kind of a situation. Especially during this period of pandemic, we can easily help the people with the CBT. People who think that now everything is lost, no source of income, no signs of normalcy returning. So people are so much bored. People are so much anxious about their future. People have lost their hope about the future. So we can easily challenge them with this CBT. It is not you who are alone in this problem. There are so many people, but that doesn't mean that the entire world is going to die. There will be still some ways to come up. There will be some ways where we can come back to normalcy, and therefore we have to challenge some of the erroneous thoughts that govern the minds of the people. And now finally, step 10 is follow-up care. As Father Joseph was mentioning, post-prevention. Of course, we help someone and then we see that someone has come out of this suicidal tendencies, but then that's not enough. We cannot simply leave that person then and there. We have to continue journeying with him. We have to keep an eye on him because he is more vulnerable, as Sister Seema mentioned. Someone who has attempted suicide once or twice will have a more probability of making another attempt, and therefore we need to keep an eye on that person for some more time to come. Once we come to know that perfectly this person is out of this and he himself or herself become a gatekeeper, then fine, we can leave. But then till that point, we do not know how long someone would take to come out of this situation. Therefore, we need to keep track with these people. And we need also to have support groups. For example, this people who are alcoholics, we have this AA, Anonymous Alcoholics, a group of people who have come out of this addiction, but then they are forming into a support group to encourage the people who are still undergoing this kind of an addiction. So we need to have all these kind of groups that can be really helpful and handy in helping the people. So follow-up care is a very much necessity in preventing and protecting the people. We need to have regular contacts with them. We also have to have strategies that are systematic, multi-pronged, as Bishop Ji was saying, multi-pronged and collaborative. It is not we who are alone helping someone. We are not competent enough to help someone all alone. We need to pull in all possible energies and powers and help from all sorts of walks of life, from all quarters, so that we can save someone. And therefore, our strategies should be really collaborative, multi-pronged, and also achievable. If we plan something, by next year, we will reduce the percentage of suicide in India by 10%. It may not be practical, it may not be possible. So we need to have achievable targets to gain. And then these are the follow-up preventive or follow-up care and preventive strategies that we need to plan for. So to conclude, this is a simple thing that every one of us can easily do. Every one of us has to have this readiness. Take a minute every day to reach out to someone, maybe a total stranger, someone who just comes across on the street, or someone who is very close to our family, someone who is one of our own family members perhaps, or someone who is very close to us, a close friend of ours, whoever may be that person. But then make the point that we take a minute every day to reach out to someone. Just don't be dumb and quiet, just looking into our own businesses. We are human beings, as social beings, as social animal. That is the definition, philosophical definition of who is a human being. A human being is a social animal. We are not an island. We are connected to a vast web of human relationships, and therefore it becomes imperative for us to relate ourselves and to be related with others. So take a minute every day, at least a minute every day, to reach out to someone. Just check with them what is up to, what is going on in their mind, what is happening around, what they are engaged in. So make a point that we make connectedness, we make relations with others, and this can change or even save a life. Let us work together to prevent suicide. Thank you very much for the patient listening. Here I end my presentation. I am Dr. Joshi Valapilli, and then I have a small clinic which is known as Samvad, dialogue. Samvad, dialoguing with ourselves, with our own self, dialoguing with the surroundings, dialoguing with the people around us, and ultimately dialoguing with the Creator. I am located in Masala, Wardha, and then you have the contact numbers and the email address there. So once again, thank you very much. Let us all work towards a healthy society, a healthy community, a healthy school surroundings in our country, in our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello.
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you, Dr. Joshi, for taking us to the detailed data of suicides and their reasons. You have summarized the reasons for suicide. You stressed on the necessity of connectedness to the network of the community and the nature. Reaching out to them, active listening to them, strong community feelings, and we can be a better help to them. Also, you discussed about the universal, selective, and indicative prevention techniques to deal with suicide. Thank you. Prevention techniques to deal with suicide. Thank you, Dr. Joshi, for taking us to the mesmerizing experience. We are sure that you can do wonders in this field to the community. The underlying reasons for suicides may differ from persons to persons. Each one of us can give peace of mind to others, respecting each other's space and individuality, supporting them in difficult times rather than blaming them each other. providing them a warm empathy and give them hope.
So many questions we got. Just combined 2-3 questions, and that question is for you, Father Joshi.
Yeah.
The person who commits suicide, will they be strong in their decision? And the second part is, what qualities should the teachers try to inculcate in a student so that their mental strength can be enhanced? Because we faced one of my students, she committed suicide way back 3 or 4 years back, Father. She attended the classes and she went, and ultimately on Monday we came to know that she hanged herself. So how we can, because these people, they are very reluctant to contact us. They keep away from us, not sharing the problems and all. So can you kindly guide?
Okay. I will first answer to the first question, that is the intention of the person who is committing suicide is very strong and intense. I say, of course, yes, because to die is not a silly thing. It needs enormous courage. As I told you, as I began my presentation, that the question of to be or not to be, that is always lingering in the mind of the person. And then only when he resolves that, yes, he has enough strength to face that uncertainty of life after death or whatever may be that. Only when he or she finds enough inner strength, yes, I can end my life. Enough is enough. Only when someone reaches to that point, he or she is able to commit suicide. And then, to your knowledge, I would say there are so many studies which say that there are so many people who actually think about ending their lives, but for the fear. Many people are not doing that because of the fear. So fear is a deterrent factor. So only when your intentions are so strong, so intense, someone goes to commit suicide. Okay, that one. And the second one, as you mentioned, is that, Sister Seema very clearly mentioned about the signs and symptoms. If someone is actually ruminating or contemplating suicide, there could be some external signs that can be very, very visible and vocal. Like someone who was very much interested in playing cricket, but all of a sudden, he or she simply loses his or her interest in that. Someone who was very jovial, always all of a sudden becomes so moody, so silent. So these are the red flags that you as a teacher can really detect, identify in the lives of your students. So I have another module for the teachers. Teacher as a counselor, that is the topic of my, that module, where I say every teacher, by the very fact that he or she is a teacher, is also a counselor, no matter whether he or she is technically trained for that. But then by the very fact that you are a teacher, you are a counselor, someone who can really detect these signs. So some of the external signs that Sister Seema was mentioning, like sleeplessness, loss of interest, becoming so moody, becoming so silent, sometimes becoming so lethargic, even neglecting our own personal hygiene. All those things are telling signs for you to know that someone is in danger. And if that is the case, as I mentioned, directly talk to them. Ask them to narrate their stories. Compel them or inspire them to open up, to share. And then if you are able to help him or her, or if you are not in a position to help, lead him or her to someone who can really help. Seeking help is another factor. So these are the things that you as a teacher can easily do. Yes, ma'am?
Yes, Father. Yes, Father. Definitely. Thank you, Father.